Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Paul, for that very theatrical introduction. I think. So that was Steve Gooding, and this is me. So the one thing I'm not going to do today is resign live on air by talking about road charging, because there will be somewhere in the room up there, there will be a DFT sniper waiting for me to start to do that, and I wouldn't get very far. So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do today is talk to you about connected vehicle services. And I'm going to talk to you about the Connected Vehicle Services Framework. And I've got a colleague, Jonathan Mann from WSP, and we're going to do a little bit of double act, and we're going to tell you about our thinking around connected vehicle services and how we see this as being the direction we want to go in terms of connected vehicle services. And I want to start with a little analogy. So we think about connected services, we think about automated vehicles and AV services, and they are maybe slightly different things, and we can all kind of visualize what an automated vehicle is. We can all kind of visualize what a Google pod will be in the future. We might not believe it will ever exist. We might not believe it's actually feasible that we will ever have that, but we can visualize it. So that gives people who work in the autonomy side of future transport a kind of clear point on the horizon everyone can look at and say, that's where we're going. We may not get there completely, but that's the direction we're going in. The traditional challenge with connected services is we haven't had that same point on the horizon. We haven't had that same thing to look at that we can all, in our respective sectors, the public sector, the private sector, suppliers, consultants, academics, whoever, we haven't had that kind of point on the horizon to aim at and kind of focus our collective effort. The Connected Vehicle Services Framework is an attempt to start to do that, start to describe what a national aspiration for connected services could be. So what do we mean by connected services? So I think there are some terms here that I'm certainly very familiar with, but I realise other people may not be. And I think it's important that we start to think about the same language here. So the starting point of this is connected vehicles. Now, what do we mean by connected vehicles? Well, if you own a vehicle that was built after 2018, it's a connected vehicle. It has things like e-call, it has a SIM card in it. It's obviously a connected vehicle. Other end of the spectrum, if you drive a 1974 Ford Cortina, but you drive around with a mobile phone in your pocket, that's a connected vehicle, and everything in between. There are elements of connectivity in virtually every vehicle on the road now. Virtually every vehicle on the road now is capable of providing some type of information back to the network, and is capable of supporting some kind of data back into the vehicle, whether it's fully integrated into the touch screens and things you have on the dashboard of a modern Tesla, or whether it's via a service on the mobile phone that you've got stuck to the windscreen. Fundamentally, they are all connected vehicles. What do we mean by connected services? Now, services is the key word here, because what we're talking about doing is starting to define the end user services that connectivity will support. So this isn't about data standards, it's not about technical standards, it's not about detailed guidance and detailed understanding of the plumbing of the way data will move. That needs to be done, but at this stage we're talking about services. We're talking about what can I as a user expect my vehicle to be able to do for me in the future? What services, what things will it deliver me that it doesn't deliver now, about maybe green light advice or warning of roadworks or diversions or emergency or stopped vehicles in the carriageway. Potentially they're all services. And similarly, services can be applied to the road operators. So in a control room, you can have services. You can have new ways of interpreting and seeing data that makes it easier to manage the network. You can have, as a maintainer, you can have new ways of using data to visualize the network, to understand where the road condition is failing, where you need to go and undertake maintenance. You can do all these things using data, and these are all individual services. Many of these already exist, and there are lots of services. There are people here today who are selling data and providing services for road maintenance, and others. There are people here who in the past have used government money to trial in-vehicle services, and any of you that have been to any of the events that we've run at the UTAC test facility in Bedfordshire will have seen us demonstrating connected services. We're not saying this is all new and nobody's done it and nobody thought about it until I did. That's absolutely not the case. The problem is, or the challenge rather, is that the services we have are very disjointed and they don't form a clear part of a clear framework, and they're often proprietary, and data is locked up in ways it maybe shouldn't be, and vendors None of you in this room, because you're all very responsible vendors, but vendors could potentially lock people into using particular services. And we want to move away from that to a more open and freely available, not necessarily free of charge, but freely available model where services are consistent and provide the same quality and operation of the same service, no matter how you receive that. We want to get to that kind of open understanding of data. And an example of that is at the moment that each manufacturer could decide how to implement speed advice warning in its vehicles in completely different ways. But the current technology that we use, the roadside sign, is consistent. Roadside signs that warn you of speed limits are the same over the entire country, and that means we all fully understand them. We want to get to a similar point in vehicles where it doesn't matter whether you're receiving your data in the vehicle or via your mobile phone or whatever. If the vehicle gives speed limit advice, for example, it does so in a consistent way. This is the kind of world we want to get to. There's a lot of text there that I'm not particularly going to read through, but when the slides are made available, you can digest that at your leisure. But we are thinking about the connected vehicle services framework. We are thinking about what steps do we need to take to get to the point where we have a defined list of the services that we aspire in this country to be able to deliver for users, whether those users are us in vehicles, us as pedestrians, us as road managers. We need to define a list of services, and services that can be delivered now, services that can be delivered in 5 or 10 years, services that are very simple and very cheap to deliver, right through to services that require major changes to road infrastructure and communications and maybe legislation. We want to define that whole list, that view of the services that users should be able to expect from the data that we have in vehicles and the communication technologies that we now have, because that then gives us a point to aim for. And it allows us to start the conversations around the conversations we need to have with Ofcom and the communications sector, the conversations we need to have with automotive, the conversations with existing suppliers in the network management and network operations space about how we ensure that we deliver common services using data. This is the point we want to get to, and this is the kind of big announcement today, is that we are now starting this work in earnest. Well, actually, we're starting it in Birmingham, but we're starting it in earnest to try and get... The only joke you'll get today from me, so make the most of it. To try and start to define that list, and we've done quite a bit of work on that. And myself and colleagues in DFT have been doing a lot of work. We've been working with people in Europe and thinking about some of the standards and service lists that we have in Europe. And we've started to build that straw man of a list. And what we'll do over the coming months is we will start to talk about it more, and we'll start to provide opportunities for people in this room and others to talk to us and be consulted on that. So in a few months' time, by the spring, we end up with a definitive list of the services that we aspire to deliver. This is really important because this helps us meet wider benefits. It helps us meet benefits around delivering better transport, greener transport. It helps us support the types of things we want to do around growth and supporting the economy, supporting access to services. The wider aims of government in general and DFT in particular will be supported by delivering connected services, will be supported by using data to deliver the things that people want to make journeys better, safer, cheaper, more efficient, and to make the job of managing the network, whether it's the work that we do with national highways or the work that local authorities do. How can we use data to allow you to provide better services, to provide services more cheaply, to save money, to be more efficient, to harness new technologies such as AI and the like? A range of services can be defined to allow you to do that, and that's what we aim to do. The way we want to think about this is around 3 streams, and I will talk about this very briefly, but this is quite key. We've all probably heard terms like I to V and V to V and V to X and the like, which describe how data flows. But for us, there are 3 key streams in thinking about connected services that will drive how we think about this. Stream 1 is infrastructure to vehicle. There is lots of data in the infrastructure. You as infrastructure owners, you have lots of data in your systems, in your UTC system, in your management systems. You have lots of data that will be useful. Projects like DTRO will develop bigger new data sets of data in the infrastructure. That data could be used to provide services to users. That data could be used to provide live services to vehicles, to road users, to pedestrians and cyclists and whoever, if we can define what those services are. That's infrastructure to vehicle. The reverse of that is vehicle to infrastructure. As we all know, modern vehicles generate terabytes of data collectively about their situation, their speed, where they are, whether they're braking harshly, whether their wipers are working, a whole range of things that are in the vehicle, some of which are proprietary and between you and the vehicle operator. Lots of that data should be public, should be usable by the public, and there are initiatives across Europe to open up large areas of data that sits in vehicles to deliver public services. And there are companies, we have companies here today whose day job is to collect that data and make it available as an asset that we can use. So we can build a range of services that allow the infrastructure to understand more about what's happening based on data in vehicles, if we can unlock that. And then there's a third stream, which is more futuristic, about how we develop two-way services, so how we play for tolling and parking and, yes, maybe road tolling at some point in the future, how we deliver those kind of transactional services that are a two-way link between the infrastructure and the vehicle. And there are a range of services there. But it's streams 1 and 2. It's the vehicle to infrastructure and infrastructure to vehicle that we're interested in now, because these are the ones that we should be able to deliver quite quickly. But all three streams will be included in the connected services framework and the list that we produce. So in more detail, and again, I'm not going to read through this, but there are a range of strategic, tactical and operational benefits that we can get from data in one place being usable in the other. Better services in vehicles, better services for operators. So you think about things like understanding road geometry, understanding signs and regulations, putting information about the rules of the road into vehicles, understanding where roadworks are and being able to tell people about that. For example, you think about the data we have in vehicles, as I say, that can help you with things like where is the road particularly slippery, where is it raining, where should we be undertaking our winter maintenance, where is congestion happening. All that type of information is within the vehicle and can be used. So there are a number of themes that sit within each of those streams. This isn't new. If you have sat-nav, if you've been on a bus, if you have a vehicle with e-call, these are connected services. Bus priority, so the ability of buses to be monitored in real time and request priority to get through traffic signals, for example, has been around for 30 years now, maybe longer. That's a connected service. E-call is a connected service. Many of us will have vehicles that have an e-call button in, a service that will raise an emergency call should we have an accident. That's a connected service. Services around EV charging and other things are connected services. They exist now. They exist in a very fragmented world, and so part of this work is about starting to bring that together into a common framework. And as I said, we've already tried some of the services actually in the wild, and if you've been to some of our events, you will have seen us demonstrate in-vehicle signage. You'll have seen us demonstrate green light advice, where we tell people how fast to travel to a green light, to a signal to get through at green. We've demonstrated roadworks warning and hazard warning and asset management. These can be done. The plumbing is there to allow this to happen. What we need is the service definitions that allow us to all narrate in a common language how this will happen. So in a second, I'm going to pass over to Jonathan, who's going to talk a little bit more about the detailed work we've been doing to ensure that the strategic framework that we develop, the connected vehicle services framework we develop, aligns with work around the rest of the world, and particularly around Europe, because there's a lot of work happening across Europe to define standards, to define groups of standards. There are groups such as C-Roads and TESA and other platforms that have a lot of action and a lot of European funding in them that are developing in great detail definitions and standards for elements of what will be in our framework. Now, we need to use that. We need to use that partly because it'd be mad for us to go and spend our money reinventing what's already there. But we need to use that because although we drive vehicles that have the steering wheel on the correct side, they are still fundamentally European vehicles. And we need to be able to ensure that vehicles built in Europe can work within a framework of standards we have. We need to ensure that as we drive between the nations of the UK, as we get a ferry to Northern Ireland and then drive down the A1 and into the Republic of Ireland, where we have services, those services persist. We need to ensure that that happens. We need to ensure that as you cross the channel, services where they are provided persist, particularly safety services. You imagine a world in the near future where people increasingly rely on their vehicle to keep them safe. Well, it won't be any good. It's no good if that service they rely on goes off just because you've passed some kind of boundary, some kind of national or regional border. The service needs to persist. So it's really important that what we do links into what's happening around Europe. I want to stop there because I want to ask Jonathan to come to the stage to talk in more detail about the detailed work that he's been doing to help us bring this to fruition. So, Jonathan.
Wow, the lights are bright. Just to say, I can definitely not speak as well as Darren, so I'm using my language of diagrams to help. So yeah, just to start off really, what we're looking at is a connected services framework, and there's a whole ontology. And what Darren mentioned about capturing all these very different types of services, there's a study that's been done by the UNECE that helps capture these in various high-level themes, service categories, sub-service categories, and then mapping what Darren mentioned about the different connected vehicle modes, be it from your infrastructure into the vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, or ultimately potentially two-way connectivity. And what we've been looking at, as Darren mentioned, is looking at all the broad breadth of services, use cases that are out there, both nationally but also internationally. We've had expert input ongoing from people like Andy Graham in the UK and others. And we're starting that mapping exercise. So you go from some really useful broad descriptions and definitions to tangible use cases that actually someone could describe and understand what that actually is. And if it's developed in London or if it's developed in Manchester, it's speaking the same language and giving the end user, be it someone in a vehicle of some sort or in the operations room, the same actual outcome. How you get there is a lot more flexible. So in terms of trying to get there, we've actually got a draft process to get there of how this guidance will ultimately manifest itself. So basically, we've got a structured approach, which is really being derived through a series of task-orientated activities. The end goal is ultimately, hopefully, again, leveraging existing really good work done by TTF already with a manual for smart streets, and ultimately surfacing that advice in a very interactive, easy-to-consume way via MFSS. And ultimately, initially, though, starting from this quite comprehensive, not a spreadsheet from hell, but quite comprehensive Excel workbook, because it's a really good way to capture all the data, because PowerPoint, Word is not really a good way to do that. So we're in the process at the moment, you can see, of refining this Excel workbook such that Darren and others in Elcree can use that for early stakeholder engagement. And it's clear enough to go into that detail, and it allows people as well to feel, and be part of that final shaping process. So no one actually feels in those engagement that we're trying to say all the answers have been done. The other good thing about the mapping, it helps identify gaps as well, where we might not have the coverage of services through existing platforms and standards, and actually, asset management is one where there's probably not a lot out there that's been defined. There's people definitely doing it, but there's not a lot there defined in some of the international platforms. The Dutch have done a really good job on Romo, and now Romo 2, and we're capturing those. So we're just mapping those, and also very much as well as with specialist input from people like Andy, looking at what's out there commercially. So we also include things that are out there commercially and map those to these broader service categories and themes. So down in the detail, really, we are a good way through that mapping process to be ready for the first stakeholder engagement, hopefully next month. So we've done all the research. There's a lot of work we already did because we've been in that space for quite a few years anyway. Got a deep dive knowledge of C-ROAS, DFRS, TISA, V2X, some of the other aspects, as well as making sure we capture everything from the TTF experts and community as well, in terms of UK services that are provided already by innovative companies within the UK. Ultimately as well, validating those then against that, and also looking at where there's things around infrastructure impact potentially, whether that's something you can just go and do now. Is it something that needs some minor application or adjustment or investment, or if it's a high aspect? Also the same applies to the communications network that Darren mentioned as well. So that's something we're stepping through in a logical process. We should be finished that at the latest by the end of November, end of this month. And I just wanted to give an example really of this is, I don't want to share a spreadsheet at this kind of event. So here's an extract from the spreadsheet where we're in the step now of mapping known UK commercial services and European activities, and ultimately in the next couple of weeks we'll be looking at a gap analysis of where maybe there's missing, such that we can then again summarise that out of the spreadsheet for Darren and the Elcree team, to aid really the stakeholder workshops that will hopefully follow. I deliberately, one of the extracts that my colleague Connie took for me, just to give you an idea, this was the UNEC theme, safety and emergency, and they have a service category, which is excellent, under vulnerable road user protection. And against that broader theme, you can see actually C Roads have a specific one that's about protecting motorcyclists. DFRS, Data for Road Safety, has a specific one where initially the mode is communication, sort of mode 2, where you're using the vehicle to communicate to infrastructure, but then ultimately you're using the infrastructure to communicate to that particular user. And then Spain have even got a use case that's about protection for cyclists. So that mapping is important because the broader categories enable you to have a whole list of distinct use cases that meet a particular need. The working model there, you can see in the back, there's a bit of a hint about what the spreadsheet is. We're also providing a user guide, which was a really good suggestion from Andy, actually, to sort of guide people through the spreadsheet before it becomes in a more user-friendly format overall. And ultimately, we'll be looking to create separate data model and visualization dashboard, probably, as a first step to integration into Mann for Smart Streets, using good old Power BI, which is something that, we're certainly the team are pretty used to using, such that you basically create an easy way to maintain the data catalog, but you're not overcomplicating what your views are in terms of whether you're looking at from a road network operator, a road user, an investor, or a particular control room scenarios. In terms of then sort of phase 2, one thing we're definitely going to be doing is leveraging what's already there on Mann for Smart Streets. We'll also, so we're building on that, we'll also be updating some of the interactive connected services architecture toolkit we've done for Darren and his predecessors, because there's some really good data there, particularly where we might be referring to some technical aspects or specific use cases to help guide people in implementation without obviously being too limiting in terms of how those are implemented, and also looking at some of the UK ERTCL's partners like Mobility Data, in this example from Belgium, who've done a really good job already in the last few years of surfacing that sort of advice to the broader public in their web-based service in really plain English that's really easy to understand. So that's kind of where we're at the moment, working hard to get ready for the stakeholder engagement sessions, but hopefully gives you a bit of an insight into some of the detail we're currently working on with Darren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan and Darren. Great to hear about streams 1 to 3, but I think it's stream 4 that we all really want, isn't it? Vehicle to vehicle. Don't you want to press the button and tell the bloke behind you not to be driving right up your... I'm just the ideas man, guys. Now, we're going to bring Steve back on stage for a few minutes, and he's got some questions, probably not around stream 4, for Darren and Jonathan. Steve, come back.
Thanks. I might have some questions about what's going on over the water as well, but we kick this around, Darren, and I confess. So I'm here as the representative of drivers, motorists, road users. Okay, and I'm confused a bit because you've talked. I think Jonathan, you've talked about users of this thing that you're producing. Who are these users? Because my impression was you're creating a great big enormous spreadsheet for you, and you'd quite like some help at some point from a wider community, but ultimately, is there a user that isn't you?
I would hope the users are all of us in our various guises. So I would hope many of the services that we deliver are for users as in road users. So therefore, they're for vehicle drivers and pedestrians and cyclists, and ultimately...
But I don't mean users of the service. You talked, Jonathan, about users of this as a tool, effectively, a thing you're producing that we're using this lovely modern terminology. Here is a tool with the implication that somebody out there, I'll mention their names, would actually be making use of it, and I don't quite see how they would. I can see how they might feed back to you on it and help you create something that's a more useful thing for you, Darren, but do you see users in a different way?
Yeah, in fact, the grand plan is as part of this connected services framework, wants some of this aspects around what is a particular service use case that can be there, is that constant ongoing advice, because people aren't going to develop this, aren't going to implement these things tomorrow. But if funding becomes available, etc., then people might want to doing that, and then there's a place. There's a single place where people can go and say, well, what is the definitive way of implementing this service? What's the recommendations? Where is their flexibility? And ultimately, that will be, rather than be in a spreadsheet, it will be in a web-based environment that road authorities can access, and other developers.
I think initially, yes, this is for me. This is for me to start to. When we get through the initial consultation on this, is for me to be able to go to ministers and say, look, we want to adopt this framework as the UK's position on connected services that we should deliver. So yes, initially it's for me, because it allows me to do that, and I need as much input as I can get from experts like Jonathan, from the sector, as we've got in this room, to help me develop that. But ultimately, it becomes, the actual tool becomes a tool for the whole sector to understand where we want to go, what is useful in terms of R&D spend, what's useful in terms of thinking about council policies and transport aspirations. Ultimately, it as the thing we're developing is useful for us, the sector, to deliver services that are useful for us as road users and operators. Okay,
and if I can do violence to, I mean, you've described things in phases. If I just say, so step one would be to create what I'll call the great big enormous spreadsheet, right, which has got all of the potential services that you can think of.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In coming up with that great big list, I can see, and Jonathan has put sort of all sorts of places you can look for where those things might be coming from, and you're going to involve people in workshops that you're going to be describing, I think, to make sure that list is comprehensive. I just wonder where in your thinking is the list that's in my head or in your head as drivers? Because it feels to me like you're deriving your list from what you know to be the art of the possible, when in fact it may be that the most important, useful V2V message we can think of is something that goes up in my rear window saying, back off, Jack. So where is the motorist voice in this, which is a question we're going to be discussing about Ireland as well shortly.
Yes, right, okay, so I think one of the problems we have here is the curse of the blank page, and actually if we all sit and look at a blank page, as maybe we have done, it's very, very hard to start this. So yes, we are seeding this process from the knowledge and the experience we have in the sector. That will lead next, so that the work that Jonathan is rushing to complete now, that will lead to a series of workshops, initially for local authorities in December, and maybe for the suppliers in January, where we will put a small room of people together to dive into this in detail, and we will take that as feedback to help us develop this. That helps us get to the next stage, which is to, early in the new year, start a formal call for evidence, where we have the framework developed to a degree that we as the sector are reasonably comfortable that it's what we want. The work that Jonathan's done has led to some kind of website hosted by the Mann for Smart Streets that people can then go and look at. And we then offer that as a general call for evidence for everybody to come back and comment. And at that point, interest groups that aren't in this room, road users, drivers, whoever, will get the opportunity to formally comment. And the outcome of that process will be a formal process we undertake in government to bring together all those comments, amalgamate them, and try and come up with a kind of second draft list, which is the list that we, as a group in this room, have come up with, the data we've got back and the evidence we've got back from the call for evidence, mashed together into something that's hopefully more honed. So I think each stage of this will polish it a little bit more until we get to a point where we have something that we as a sector and we as a wider community are happy. It describes the services that we want to see in vehicles want to see for users over the coming years.
I was going to say, we haven't surfaced it yet, but in the background we've done some previous work as well where we have looked at different service categories and how they in effect, you know, what their benefits are, where such that you are looking at those different groups, and certainly the vehicle user is prominent in a lot of those in terms of both probably in terms of behavioural benefits of their behaviour, but also, like you say, benefits directly for them, be it in a car, a motorcycle, a bus, or a bicycle or an e-scooter.
Sure. I mean, I'm just very conscious that as someone who drives, somebody somewhere thought that what I really wanted in the car was the touchscreen, and I've got news for you. I'd never wanted it, and I still don't. And this issue of, I think it's quite interesting. We talk about, loosely, we talk about V2I, V2V, V2X. We never talk about I to D, infrastructure to driver, that last important step of exactly how is this information conveyed. I hope that's going to be part of your thinking.
I think that's what you touched on, Darren, wasn't it? About, you know, how you move from static road signs to, you know, that actually you do want it clear and consistent.
I think so, and I think that the reason why I'm increasingly careful to talk about services is because those services are ultimately for users, and the users will be drivers, which is why we're trying to get away from talking about connected data or connected vehicles, because they are all part of a bigger picture, which is providing services for users, whoever those users may be.
Okay.
I think, although increasingly unfashionable, they will in lots of cases, be drivers.
Well, there'll be drivers, but also you said this is not simply about cars.
Absolutely.
This is about use of the highway network, including for those of us who walked here from our hotel this morning, pedestrians using Google Maps to navigate across the centre of Birmingham. Paul, you're going to have to keep an eye on time for me, but I have got one more question I want to ask you before I leave this, which is, so I saw your slide about the framework, the number 5, I think it was the five areas that this contributes to. But I might not have spotted it. I didn't see integrated national transport strategy there, which I suspect all of us are waiting with bated breath. Show of hands? No? Bated breath for that to come out.
Let's wait, 3 hands. Yeah.
Coming in a second, right? So we know these are things that the current crop of transport ministers are very keen on. Integrated national transport strategy is coming. The new road safety strategy is coming. I think we've got a new data strategy coming as well. Yeah. How does this initiative fit into the political priorities of our current ministers, and therefore what sort of backing can we expect them to be giving it?
I think it underpins a lot of that, and certainly the draft integrated national transport strategy does mention this work. It mentions it as a key element, but how are we going to deliver a lot of the aspirations we have in the integrated national transport strategy? We will deliver them by using data to provide services that allow road users and road operators to function more effectively. It underpins some of the aspirations we have. The same with the road safety strategy. How do we deliver better road safety in a world where vehicles are pretty much physically engineered as safe as they can be, the roads generally are physically engineered as safe as they can be? We will deliver better road safety through better information, better advice to drivers and road users, and having defined connected services that do that provides a foundation to build that on. So I think this is foundational to a lot of what we want to do in transport over the coming years.
Okay. Right. Paul, I saw you coming up there, so let's leave the questions for the moment. Thanks, gents.